Welcome to another episode of the Talent Transformation Podcast. We're joined here today by Keith Golden. Keith is the Chief Information Officer of RGP. Keith, welcome.
Delighted to be here, Dimitri.
Great to have you here. Keith, can you just maybe fill in a little bit about RGP for me? Give me an idea.
Certainly. RGP is a global professional services firm. We are focused these days in two key areas. We help companies with their operational needs day to day, and also we're focused a lot on transformation efforts and providing support to transformation efforts.
Yeah, and what's the scope there? Is it U.S. based?
Oh,
It's global?
Worldwide.
It's global.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're running technology for a global organization. Obviously, you're providing the technology to run the operations of the organization, but how much are you getting involved in the changes in the way your customers approach technology?
Oh yeah, great question. We are very much focused on our internal transformation effort right now, which is we call Project Phoenix. It's very much a program, not so much project, but multi-year, multi-function, multi-platform, and to that end, we are getting our own house in order, so to speak,
Right.
with the technology that will allow us then to become better responsive to
Right.
our clients.
So you're providing operational services for your clients. So in a
Right.
sense, you're part of their organization in some way, right?
Oh, very, very much so. Very much so.
And so your digital transformation is something that doesn't just have to transform your organization, but has to transform the services that affect them. Where do you feel you are in your own transformation? Are you in stage 1 or stage 6, or what's happening there?
we're midway through. I would say
Okay.
we are just about the tipping point. We went live with our go-to-market applications in February in North America, of which Avature was a part. In December, we'll go live with our financials. So that's the system of record, right?
Right.
So that's pretty darn important. And then subsequent to that, then we'll move to our international operation and our subsidiaries.
Right.
So still a lot of work to go, but more of a matter of, lather, rinse, repeat
Right.
at this
Yeah,
stage,
yeah.
as opposed
Okay.
to breaking new ground. So we've got a lot of confidence.
Yes. All right. So you're midway through it,
Midway
and it's going well.
It's going well.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And how much impact do you think that's going to have on the business?
Oh, it's going to have. It is already having enormous.
You're saying.
Impact.
Enormous. Okay.
It's truly transformational.
Right. Okay.
It's not just transformational in name, but in reality as well.
How difficult was it to do it? And I want to take that point from the you're CIO. Okay. So mostly we talk to CHRO or HR leaders,
Right.
and less so with the tech leadership. Tech leadership, in my opinion, has more license to do digital transformation, right? Because you do own tech in the company.
Right.
Did you have to sell that to the company, or did you just snap your fingers and say, "Hey guys, it's digital transformation now"?
Yeah, I think there was just widespread understanding, starting with our CEO Kate Duchesne, that we need
to go there.
Yeah, we
Right.
just needed to go there. Had that executive alignment, had the buy-in from the CHRO and
Right.
and the other key leaders there. But that said, even with the buy-in, it's difficult work. Doing transformation, even at its best, with the best outcomes, it's hard work.
It's hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's extra work.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. For everybody.
For everybody.
Right.
And to your point about CIOs and their role in this, I've been doing transformation work for 10, 15 years now, and that started with IT organization turnarounds, right? Where the
Right.
IT organization's underperforming, but we could be very insular with that, very isolated, just focus on ourselves. The last, 7 to 10 years of my transformation work has been enterprise-wide and radically different, right? Where IT is just a small part of that,
right?
And is an enabler, but it these efforts won't succeed without the the efforts
Yeah.
of the entire executive team and all of the
Now,
functions.
you're bringing these businesses, these operating businesses, into this new technical experience, right?
Yes.
And you're carrying more weight,
Yeah.
right? So the non-technical people in your organization, how did you describe what was going to be the experience, or did you have, or did you?
We actually did a lot of work going out cross-functionally to find out what people were looking for.
Okay.
In solutioning or before solutioning, just getting a sense of what do you feel is missing? What do you see competitors using? What do you hear about that we don't have? And that's one of the things, the inputs that led us to where we are now with more of a best of breed.
Do you think that feedback was surprising to you, or very revealing, or?
I think we, at the highest level, everybody understood that we were behind and needed to make changes.
Okay, right, yeah.
But to the here's where it's always surprising to me, no matter how long I do this, is no matter how much you try to put yourself in the shoes of the CFO or the CHRO or COO, CEO, to get that feedback, right?
Yeah.
Real time.
Yeah.
This is what we're missing. This is what we need. It's always somewhat, bracing to get that.
And
you might be
revealing,
proud of what you have. And
Yeah.
then you hear that where it's coming up short.
Right.
And,
Right. Yes.
so,
yeah, because you are almost asking for what's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And
How can we do better?
Yeah. How can we do better? And you can, people can get a little defensive, and the stakes are pretty high though. So in your business now, do you feel like, you said you have some catching up to do, right? Do you think that the way companies are dealing with talent today is changing a lot? And how are you guys seeking out that competitive advantage with technology?
Yeah. Great questions. I think at the smarter companies, it's changed or is changing a lot, and then with everyone else, they're behind.
Right.
In their approach to talent. Often probably other of your guests have said, the war on talent is over and talent won, right?
Right.
And despite a little bit of, turbulence right now in the macroeconomic environment, that is how it's going to be going forward.
Yeah.
And so for, from where I sit, CHROs, other folks who are responsible organizationally for delivering talent, that role is increasingly critical. And my job and the job of other CIOs is to make sure that the systems are there that can enable that,
Right.
and can unlock that. Because, to some extent, we're all going after the same few people.
Yeah.
And the
sure.
faster that we can
Right.
get to them, and the more customized that experience can be, the more personalized it can be, the more likely we are to attract and
Yeah.
retain that talent. So,
Yeah, well, and the attention span of the talent is drawn to so many other things. It's
Yes.
really a fight for attention,
Yeah.
right? And you have very little time to get your message out
that's right.
in the talent space right now. And I don't think that aperture is going to widen to any degree. I mean,
No.
it's not. It's what it is.
I agree.
And so it's kind of like, how agile can you be to sort of take advantage of occasional opportunities to sort of get some competitive advantage and move a little further forward in the market. I think that, for most of our customers, nothing gets done that's not digital. Nothing at scale gets done that's not digital now. So
That's
how quickly you can get that digital expression of what you need is really becoming, the definer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. What I've seen, I'd be interested in your reflection on this, because you've got some, dynamite experience from the early days, so to speak.
The early days.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It's a nice way of saying it.
In this space. Well, yeah. I see now those initial digitalization efforts really being around things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could, whether it's photographs or music, just being able to digitize that
Yeah.
and do that transformation. Those were the early obvious wins. But, those battles have largely been won now. And so now the focus, from what I see, is how do you bring that same digital momentum, but to the talent space, which isn't, we're not talking about things, right?
Yeah.
These are
It's a harder problem.
real people.
It's a harder problem. Yeah.
But you need folks on your side internally and as partners who are clued into that, right? Who
Right.
understand the need for keeping the personalization in the experience, but also speed. You just got to be able to move so quickly. Which means getting through candidates quickly, figuring out who you want to talk to, keeping those discussions going.
That's a very good point, though. That it actually gets a little more difficult now to really move the technology into some of these areas. And I guess you have a good perspective on that because while you are a CIO, you're in a company that is primarily focused on talent, right? So obviously, you guys are always talking about talent. It's your business,
yes,
right? So how do you keep everybody focused on their day job, okay, and still focused on, leveraging technology, getting the maximum value out of technology? Do you segment inside the company? Like, okay, so you're an ops, you're thinking of the future, or is it a more organic process?
Yeah, for us, it's more organic, but I will tell you, I have a strong bias there toward that's where leadership comes into play, right? Where, and that's whether it's in my chair, COO's chair, CEO, everyone in senior leadership has to be aligned and has to be carrying that message every day that yes, we have to keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep train running, but we've got to embrace and push forward the newer the work that's going to lead to our a good future for us. And it's, as I mentioned, it's very difficult sometimes to do that.
Yeah. How do you fail at those things?
Traditionally, I would say, 2 or 3 things mark that. A couple that I think are particularly relevant here is we've talked about executive alignment, right?
Yeah.
That, as strange as it seems, in 2024, there are still companies where the CEO will stand up and make a speech at the beginning of a transformation effort and then hand it over to a CIO or somewhere else and say, call me if you need me. That just doesn't work. Those are the efforts that fail, where you don't have the full buy-in at the executive team day in, day out. So that's one. Another common mistake that I see is undervaluing of change management and the change management function.
Yeah.
We are blessed with just a fantastic internal change management team. Never seen anything like it, which has been crucial to our success. But as much as I value this, I've been in so many conversations in earlier roles where the CEO, CFO just don't get it. They don't want to pay. And isn't change management training? Can't we do that ourselves?
Yeah. Well, we get on to the tough side of that sometimes because companies go out, they buy a technology that's different, but if they don't do the change management, it comes in and it just clashes with what people are doing. And you're right. If you frame it just in terms of like training on the system instead of changing the way you're doing the business, people go through the training and then they just go back to doing what they're doing, or they don't go through the training because they say, my business really isn't changing anyway. So why do I have to do the training here? And that's really, change management is something that, it's easy to leave it out, but it's hard to have to get by when you've done that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's a question that asks itself, if you say, well, we're transforming our business, right? We're doing a transformation, but then we're just going to train against that. I mean, shouldn't you, if it's that big, if you truly are transforming your business, shouldn't you have part of your program being, driving that change management aspect as well. You can't
Yeah.
just put a
Yeah.
little caboose on the end of training
Right.
or change.
Right.
Another the last one that I would touch on, in terms of where folks come up short these days is just having the right talent on
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
team. I mean, again, it's obvious, but I would encourage anyone who's considering embracing or beginning one of these journeys, or who started this, to make sure where you can. We talked about backfilling, right? Make sure
Yep.
that you have the
Yeah.
the support, but make sure that you get the very best talent that you can to do this work, because so much of it, there's a real difference between someone in the 80th or 90th percentile of their capabilities with whatever the technology is that's underway, and an average person.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's enormous, and I don't feel that it's always been quite that way, but it's very profound. That difference
Yeah.
is very profound
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, I also think that two people even being given equal capability, if one has been in an experience in an environment where a lot of change has occurred, they're just more fit.
Yeah.
And fitness is really important because things happen in a short period of time. The 12 months, 18 months, for business transformation is a short amount of time, right? So
Yeah.
people that have just done those things before, they move faster, right?
They do.
So I think, you always like to think, there's a special athlete that is just naturally superior, but sometimes it's because they've been training
Exactly.
and the other person hasn't, right?
That's right.
So I think that, that's the argument for being able to continuously change, right? To
That's
actually adopt change as part of the operating model of the company. Well, we're always going to be changing, so let's all get good at it, okay? Because market conditions change and tech changes, so you have new opportunities. And that, of course, leads us to the topic we cannot ignore here, which is artificial intelligence, right? So let's get your take on it, okay?
Yeah. So, great question. So I'm in the couple thoughts on that. I'm in the school, of the camp that is, at least initially, I think what we're going to see is good AI making effective people better at what they do, as
Right.
opposed to replacing them.
Right.
Perhaps that's coming, but I think first stop is just force multiplier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for us as organizations, we need to find ways to get those tools into the hands of our performers, to make sure that they are getting that multiplier effect. But for us as a mid-sized company, and I think for a lot of firms now, we can't afford to make the enormous investments in AI that some people are making. So we have to be very shrewd about picking partners who have that experience, right?
Right.
Been there, have been investing in it for a while, aren't just doing it because it's, the latest thing, and leverage their experience, and leverage their investment. That's critically important for us, and I think for a lot of people like us.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's first of all, it's expensive to cut through the hype cycle.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, research, analysis, evaluation, and when you get into deploying AI, it's expensive to just throw it at the wall, because I know people sort of have this feeling that AI is free because they've experienced it on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is kind of free, and you're like, wow, this is great. But the computational power you need to do AI is, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times what you need to, run an application with a database and a UI and save a value to a field. We're talking about something completely, different. So it's not going to be free. So you're going to have to get good. It's super powerful, but you're going to have to put it in places where you know what kind of value you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
Or have a good sense of it anyway, because you haven't done it yet. It's hard to know, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel adventurous in that sense, or were you cautious moving to adventurous?
Well,
or are you...
we're cautious moving to adventurous, though. To be fair, I'm 100% focused on delivering the digital transformation that we have underway, and then we'll be able to open our eyes a little bit more again.
So that's interesting because you do, when you start these kinds of projects, yes, you have to be careful not to get too distracted. My days in the internet business, I used to say to people, well, part of my success was I didn't get distracted by everything that was going on.
Right.
People used to say, oh, you're in the internet, so you know about this and this and this. And I'd say, actually, I don't know about those things. I know what I need to know, okay,
Right.
to get to my next step in the game. And, I was surrounded by people who were studying everything that was happening, and you couldn't use that.
Yeah. I mean, fantastic point. We've just got to be focused,
Yeah.
and we'll fast follow as needed. We'll let
Okay.
others make some mistakes
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the relationship between the CIO and the CHRO.
Yeah, great question. That relationship is becoming more and more important over time. I think earlier in my career, we were much more siloed.
Yeah.
Each of us, the CHRO and the CIO, and increasingly we see in these transformation efforts, in particular, that the CEO is no longer looking exclusively to the CIO to drive those efforts.
Mm-hmm.
He or she may be looking more to a group of people, including the CHRO, CFO. So that all of a sudden that relationship is much more important than it used to be. One of the things that I would encourage my CHRO colleagues to do is to be proactive with their CIOs through
Okay.
happenstance and maybe in some cases temperament. CIOs aren't always the best at opening those relationships, particularly when
Okay.
there's a non-obvious nexus, right?
Yes.
But CIOs just generally love to know how things work. They love to be more effective.
Right.
And if a CHRO can build that relationship or they make the first move in building that relationship, it can pay off just wonderfully for the organization and for those two folks.
That's an interesting point. I didn't really think of it that way. But yes, maybe the CHRO has to go out and build that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really be the one to make the first step.
Yeah.
Of course, I encourage my technology colleagues and the folks in my organization
Of course.
to do that, and that's kind of part of my you get with me. But a lot of CIOs and good value drivers can often get just caught up in the technology.
Well, you do.
delivering the technology.
Sure. Yeah, you get caught up. We have cyber security issues that seem certainly paramount, and you might focus on them more than anything. And you have AI, and you have to understand it and figure out where in the organization it's going to go, where it's going to go first, how you're going to evaluate it, and you could easily, the list of building relationship with the CHRO could easily be down at item number 10 on the list, and I think you're right. It's the CHRO should say, hey, I think I'm down on the list I'm down on his or her list. So let's work myself up there and interject.
I got to tell you, in my career, my experience, those connections, that's often where the magic happens, right?
Right.
Where you build that relationship, information is shared, things that you didn't know, right, about the journey that your colleague is working through, the challenges that they face, and how that's really relevant to technology and what we're doing in the technology chair. So I could go on quite a bit about
Good
that.
point,
So,
though. Good point. Yeah.
Another thing that comes to mind, not entirely related to this, but top of mind for me is recent survey data that RGP has around talent and the talent that's required to deliver these transformational efforts that we've been talking about. So RGP went out in late 2023, and surveyed 1,000 leaders, senior leaders at companies with $1 billion or more in revenue, and came back with some interesting findings about talent and about their digital transformation efforts. So of these companies, 1,000 companies, the average number of transformations underway that had a program or project cost of $1 million. There were 20 projects underway with a cost of $1 million or more. So people clearly have the appetite for the work, and the need is there. But when it comes to delivery, all but only 15% of those companies in each of the last 4 years said we're delivering everything we set out to deliver.
Really?
So that's 85% are saying, yeah, we're doing this, but we're not getting what we want to get.
Yeah.
And then the reason that they identify for that coming up short, number one reason is the lack of talent. So 40%,
absolutely.
which was the largest category, say that they don't have the talent necessary to
pull it
do
off,
everything that they've been.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can see that. I mean, that digital transformation requires people who have vision about, digital experiences, what digital products are and how they work, how people use them. And, that hasn't been, there's a reason it's new, and
that's right.
And you don't have people that say, well, yeah, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've done it 15 times. A lot of companies they started their digital transformation 3 or 4 years ago, okay, or maybe 2 years ago. I look at the place where I see some of that talent. I was in the internet business. In the internet business, it was kind of like shaping product that people would interact with, and having commercial success with that was a very different kind of experience. And you sort of, it's very similar to what digital transformation is. Digital transformation, in a sense, a lot of companies are trying to get to what they saw happen when you saw these disruptors arrive in the market, like the Amazons and other companies that really lived. The technology was ingrained into everything that they did. But that wasn't really a lot of companies. If you took all the people that were involved in that type of business, you couldn't power too many digital transformations in the marketplace.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of people that worked for me at Hot Jobs, and several of them went off to Amazon and worked on product there, and they were early product people in 1996 to 2002. And they went out and did other things, but we're talking about small numbers of people. So I think people are having to really rethink the way they use their experience to get a digital transformation to come off.
Yeah. And if you'll allow me, shameless plug for my firm. This is
allowed.
This is a space that we're very comfortable in, right? It's providing talent to, whether it's backfilling for your leaders who are conducting a transformation, or providing that critical talent, or driving the project itself.
Okay.
So that's one reason why I'm personally very bullish on RGP and our future, particularly as we work through our own transformation. Is these needs are ongoing. Agile requires constantly working on these platforms and updating them. It's not a one and we'll come back to this.
No, it's just a new way. It's a new way of doing business. Right. So, and that's exciting. Right. I'd love to hear more about your journey. I'd love to have you back here at some point to tell us how this transformation is coming out, what kind of impact it has on the business.
Love to be back.
But it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Dimitri. My pleasure.